December 8, 2025, 10:42 p.m. In a world where online connections blur the lines between reality and illusion, two people, thousands of miles apart, met in the most unlikely of places, a dating app. Jamari, a 27-year-old graphic designer from Atlanta, Georgia, and Tasha, a 25-year-old marketing specialist in Los Angeles, California, felt something spark. No pretense. No hidden agendas. Just two strangers finding comfort in each other's words, despite the vast distance that separated them, over 2,000 miles. For months, their conversations flowed easily, each of them sharing pieces of their lives, their dreams, and the kind of love they thought they might never find. They weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for real. And they found it. Their connection felt undeniable, even with the space between their cities. Late-night video calls, laughter that echoed through the screens, deep conversations that lasted well into the night. For them, it was more than just words on a screen. It was the beginning of something they both craved. But what happens when the screen fades, and reality steps in? When the carefully curated profiles and pictures start to collide with the truths they never expected? Jamari had pictured something different when he imagined their first meeting, but nothing could prepare him for the shocking moment that would change everything.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
And Tasha? She thought she had found the one, only to face something she could never have anticipated. The question isn't just about the connection they shared, it's about what happens when the truth comes crashing in. Will love survive the truth? Or will everything unravel in a moment of disbelief? The clock ticks, and with every passing minute, the tension between them grows. What happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and the fine line between fantasy and reality. What happens when expectations collide with reality? And who will be left to pick up the pieces when the truth comes to light? For months, Jamari and Tasha built their relationship over countless late-night calls and hours of texts, each message deepening their connection. Despite the 2,000 miles that separated them, their bond only seemed to grow stronger. Jamari, sitting in his cozy apartment in Atlanta, would talk about visiting Tasha in Los Angeles, about the plans he had for their first meeting, and how it would be the beginning of something real. Tasha, in her bustling city, would smile, nodding in agreement, sharing the same dreams of meeting face-to-face and building a future together. Their words painted pictures of what could be, weaving a narrative of two people who seemed destined for each other, even across the vast distance between their cities. Every conversation, no matter how trivial, felt like an essential piece of the puzzle. Jamari, always confident and charming, spoke about his life in Atlanta, his work as a graphic designer, his friends, his family, and how he imagined Tasha fitting into it all. Tasha, with her warm laugh and radiant personality, opened up about her career in marketing, her passions, and her vision for a life with someone who truly understood her. They spoke of the places they'd go, the adventures they'd have, and the quiet moments they'd cherish. It wasn't just the long nights and words that bound them, it was the promise of what was to come. As their connection deepened, they both began to talk seriously about the future. Jamari, with his trademark optimism, would tell Tasha that he was falling for her. Tasha, equally captivated, would admit that she felt the same way. They started making plans to visit each other, despite the logistical challenges and the expense of flying across the country. For them, the distance was just another hurdle they were ready to face. They spoke about bridging that gap, how one day, they could live together, perhaps in Los Angeles, where Tasha's career was flourishing, or maybe back in Atlanta, where Jamari felt grounded. They dreamed of building a life together, not in pieces over the phone but in reality. But with every promise, there was a layer of uncertainty. The promise of a future together, in person, felt both thrilling and terrifying. What would happen when the distance finally disappeared? Would the reality match the dream they'd built in their heads? Neither of them had an answer, but they continued to hold on to the dream, convinced that their love was strong enough to withstand anything, even the shock that would soon shake their entire world. It was a quiet evening when Jamari made the promise that would change everything. After a long, emotionally charged conversation, he told Tasha, "I'm coming to LA. I'll fly out, and we'll finally meet. You and me, together, in person. It's happening." His voice was full of certainty, his words laced with the kind of hope that can only come from a dream finally becoming real. He spoke about what would come next, how he wanted them to get a place together, how he'd introduce Tasha to his family, and how they'd build a life around the love they'd created despite the distance. Tasha, overwhelmed with joy, felt her heart swell with the thought that their long-distance connection could soon become something tangible. For the first time in months, everything felt possible, like the future they'd talked about for so long was within their reach. In Los Angeles, Tasha threw herself into preparations. She bought new clothes, imagining what she'd wear when they met, and made sure her apartment was spotless. Every detail was important, she wanted everything to be perfect for their first time together. She spent hours picking out the right outfits, rehearsing the moments they'd share when Jamari walked through her front door. Her excitement was palpable. The countdown had begun, and each passing day felt like a step closer to the life they'd both dreamed about. She could almost hear Jamari's laugh echoing in her apartment, see his smile in the space that had only ever been filled with her own thoughts and hopes. But the closer they got to the day they'd meet, the more the distance seemed to weigh on both of them. Jamari, caught up in the fast-paced life of Atlanta, couldn't stop thinking about how he'd finally closed the physical gap between them. Meanwhile, Tasha, feeling the vibrant energy of LA, found herself obsessing over every detail, wondering how their connection would translate when it was no longer confined to a screen. With the promise of their first meeting looming, they both felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would the reality of their love match the dream they'd built together? The anticipation was only growing stronger with every passing day. After months of anticipation, the big day finally arrived. Jamari boarded his flight from Atlanta, his heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. He had been imagining this moment for so long, what Tasha would look like, how she would feel in person, how their connection would translate once they were together. As the plane descended toward Los Angeles, Jamari couldn't help but smile, thinking about how much their lives were about to change. This was the moment he had dreamed of, meeting Tasha in person, seeing her face to face, finally bridging the gap that had only existed through a screen. At LAX, Tasha stood nervously near the arrivals gate, her heart racing as she scanned the crowd for Jamari. She had spent days preparing for this moment, imagining how they would embrace, what they would say, and how everything would feel so much more real. She had dreamed of this day for months, and now that it was here, the excitement was mixed with a deep sense of vulnerability. What would he think when he saw her? Would he love her as much as he said he did through their late-night calls and messages? When their eyes finally met, there was a moment of pure joy. They smiled, excited to be standing in front of each other at last. But then, Jamari froze. The reality of Tasha's appearance hit him harder than he expected. While she had described herself as curvy and plus size, the woman standing before him was significantly larger than he had imagined from the photos they had exchanged. Jamari's smile faltered for just a split second, but he quickly recovered, forcing a grin as he tried to mask his shock. The image of Tasha he had built in his mind didn't match the person in front of him, and though he wasn't prepared for the emotional jolt it gave him, he tried to push past it. Tasha, sensing the change in his demeanor, felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She had hoped for an embrace that would wash away the fear of being judged, but instead, there was an awkwardness in the air, a tension that neither of them had anticipated. For Jamari, the reality of their first meeting was harder to reconcile than he had imagined, and for Tasha, the vulnerability she had hidden behind her words now stood exposed in the silence between them. The first few minutes after they met were heavy with silence. Jamari stood there, trying to mask the shock on his face, but his eyes betrayed him. Tasha noticed the shift immediately, the warmth in his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and the tension between them was palpable. The easy chemistry they had shared through video calls now felt distant and strained. Jamari's mind raced as he tried to process the difference between the online Tasha he had fallen for and the woman standing before him. He had imagined this moment for so long, but the reality was harder to accept. The discomfort was hard to hide, and no matter how much he tried to push it aside, disappointment seeped through. Tasha, sensing his withdrawal, struggled to hold herself together. She had hoped that their first meeting would be everything they had dreamed of, but instead, the unease in Jamari's demeanor left her feeling exposed. As the hours passed, Jamari became more distant. His responses grew shorter, his attention divided. Tasha, devastated by the shift, began to question everything. Was this how Jamari truly felt? Had he been pretending all along, simply in love with the idea of her? Tasha, who had always struggled with her body image, wondered if this was the reason Jamari had pulled away. She had never thought anyone could love her the way she was. And now, standing in front of him, she was left questioning whether she was worthy of the love they had built together. Jamari, on the other hand, began to reflect on his own actions and feelings. As much as he tried to justify his shock, he couldn't ignore the shame that gnawed at him. His reaction had been rooted in superficial expectations, something he hadn't expected in himself. He had promised to be open, to accept Tasha for who she was, yet here he was, disappointed by something as shallow as appearance. Jamari's struggle was evident, but the damage had already been done. They both felt the weight of what had changed between them, and the future they had dreamed about seemed less certain with every passing moment. A few days after their meeting, Jamari, back in Atlanta, reached out to Tasha. His voice on the phone was filled with regret. He apologized for his actions, admitting that he was struggling to accept her body, something he hadn't fully prepared for. Tasha listened in silence, her heart heavy, but she responded with grace. "It's okay, Jamari," she said softly. "I understand that everyone has their own preferences. But love should never be about looks." Her words hung in the air, a painful reminder of how quickly things could change. As the days went on, the distance between them grew. Their once frequent messages became less and less, and the calls stopped altogether. Tasha, hurt but resolute, began to focus on herself. She realized that she deserved someone who would value her for who she truly was. Jamari, too, reflected on his actions, understanding that love isn't about physical appearance, but acceptance and connection. A year after everything had fallen apart, Jamari reached out to Tasha. His message was simple yet filled with emotion. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I don't think I was ready for what you offered back then. I miss our late-night talks. Would you ever consider giving it another shot?" Tasha stared at the message on her phone, her heart stirring with a mixture of nostalgia and hesitation. The words stirred old memories, but also reminded her of the pain she had gone through. Tasha, now more confident and self-assured than ever, smiled as she read the message, but she didn't respond immediately. She let it sit, unread for hours, letting the weight of Jamari's words sink in. "I've moved on," she whispered to herself, but then a small part of her wondered, who knows what could happen. She looked at the message again, feeling the tension of the past year rise within her. But for now, she left it there, unanswered. The screen fades to black, leaving the question hanging, what will Tasha do next? In the end, the story is a reminder that love doesn't always follow the path we expect. It's not about perfection or appearances, it's about accepting each other for who we truly are. Sometimes, love finds its way back when we least expect it, teaching us that real connections go beyond the surface. True love is about acceptance, no matter the distance, no matter the size, no matter the difference. The person you're meant to be with might not be who you first envisioned, but love is always deeper than what meets the eye.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.